hello. Hello. Welcome to week 8 of Black Minds Matter. I'm Professor Davis Felix. And this week we're going to discuss promising teaching practices to help improve the success rate of our black males. With our panel today, we're going to go ahead and introduce our panel.
Hi, my name is Professor Kendra Hogan-Fawibe.
Barbara LaBranch, Director of the Faculty Center.
And we also have two of our males joining us from the African American Cultural Forum. They're going to introduce themselves.
I'm Javed Brooks, sophomore at Oviedo campus.
Hey, I'm Marquise Willis from Southwest as well, Oviedo campus.
Thank you. This week's discussion is very pivotal, and I found to be the most important. I say that every week, but this one was most important to me because it actually gets into what we can do to actually improve the success rate of our African American males inside the classroom. So it gets closer inside the classroom and things that we can do as instructors and professors. And some of the things that were addressed in the video this week, we're going to kind of regroup here. We have two more joining us on our panel. We're going to let them introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Dr. Gerald Jones.
Hello, Dr. Babuka Job.
Thank you. So this week there were, as I said, there were a major discussion about things that we could do to improve the success rate of our black males in the classroom. And these are very important ideas and research ideas that were shared during the video. So as we discuss our questions today, we will be addressing those particular ideas and research strategies that were addressed in the video. So this week, we have 4 discussion questions. And the first question says, how do current teaching and learning patterns disadvantage black boys and men? And I would like to first we have 2 of our students, as I said, from our African American Cultural Forum who are black males. So I would like to hear from them some of the things that they thought put them at a disadvantage for being successful.
I think one of the disadvantages that we face through like teaching, like learning from teachers is it doesn't apply mainly to most of the African American youth. You can't relate to it, or we were just me and the professor were just having a conversation about how I haven't had a Black History Month project or paper since the 5th grade, and I'm in college now, and I just started learning about it again. So they have to apply it. They have to shed light at least.
I can definitely agree with Javed on this regarding they're taking a lot of history that we need for us, what we come from, in order for us to learn where we're going. So the history does repeat itself. So far as us learning our history in the background, it will help us learn and be interested in what we're learning.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Professor LaBranch to go ahead and give her input on question 1. How do current teaching and learning patterns put our black boys at disadvantage?
Well, in order to answer that question, I think we have to look back at some of our previous sessions when we talk about, for example, the hidden biases that teachers often bring into the classroom that cause them to view black boys and men in a particular light. Specifically seeing them as less than capable, seeing them as troublemakers, possibly perceiving that their actions might be counter to the educational process, when in fact, just like our young men here have stated, oftentimes what these students are facing is just material that doesn't relate to them, or that they cannot relate to, which is why one of the speakers in today's session talked about taking something as simple as multiplication, for example, and relating it to students' everyday experiences. So those kinds of practices. And then outside of the classroom, we've talked a lot about how black students and black males in particular are more often relegated to special education courses. They're often relegated to detention or out of school suspension for minor infractions or infractions that other students would generally get a slap on the wrist for. So these types of things in and out of the classroom. Now, as a college or at the college level, obviously we don't see that, but we still see, as Dr. Wood suggested, that college professors have this sort of hidden bias towards students, and particularly males of color, to the extent that those students often don't feel welcome in the classroom and don't feel a part of the educational experience.
Okay, Dr. Joby, would you have anything to add to that?
I think this is a very good question, actually, and we've talked about this before. I think understanding the kind of students we have is very important, learning about their narratives when they come to our courses. And, you know, I mean, in the video, it talks about, I mean, incorporating the cultural relevance to our curriculum. And somebody, I think the student mentioned about the Black History Month. I think it's okay to have Black History Month, but why do we have it? Maybe that should be something students should understand. And why is it only for 28 days? Why shouldn't it be the rest of the year? I think these are things that our students need to understand, not because there's something, but why do we have something? And also, I mean, you know, looking at even, we also discussed this about the racial injustices that we talked about before. And you have some homes where you have fatherless homes where actually the support system might not be there. So, I mean, disadvantage is not only in the school level, it could also be outside of the school. Because if the students are not doing well in school, maybe also we should look at outside, maybe their households. But if you have many parents, Black parents, I mean, like research shows that you have many Black males who are incarcerated, more than the white counterparts, then you're going to have more fatherless Black fathers in the homes than the other side. So that support system is not going to be there because you're going to have a single parent who might be working and wouldn't have time to really sit down and then look at the homework of their kids. And the other thing also I talked about was also language can be a barrier. And you know, you have international students, but also even some of the African American students, maybe who were not socialized into the proper grammar, I mean, that we learn in school. Then the question also becomes, what language are we learning? I mean, really, and who's teaching these languages to us? So when we give students assignments as faculty, we have to also, I mean, let them know how we're gonna assess the research papers we give them. Are we gonna recite them on content, or are we gonna recite them on grammar? At least they know, but then, you know, and then maybe give weight to the way we assess. I think it's important to look at all those things and hopefully help the students to do well.
I want to add as well something that Dr. Chance Lewis mentioned in terms of the current patterns that disadvantage Black boys and Black men. And he mentioned, number one, that there is a lack of experienced teachers than anyone else amongst other demographics. He also mentioned the curricula doesn't lead to college admissions to the most competitive colleges, and they call that public reciprocity. And then he mentioned the ability to connect with Black students. And one of the things that I kind of put an asterisk by is that when our students or Black boys and men do not excel in higher ed or beyond 12th grade, we reach the conclusion that everybody is not college material. And so he challenged us to really dissect that phrase. And I'm pretty sure most of us have heard it before when someone doesn't attend school. Well, college is not for everybody. Well, that may or may not be true, but for the purpose of this conversation, we may want to ask why. And I think that he really laid out that framework, in particularly what's happening at the K through 12th grade area in terms of the curricula that these students are receiving in comparison to those other racial demographics that exceeds beyond and go on and finish college.
Thank you. And he also mentions in there, Gerald, just since you're talking about Dr. Lewis, how we need to, how our students are not exposed, that they learn by being exposed to different learning environments, different strategies, and they're not being exposed to different situations. So having that hands-on one-on-one and having that exposure is also something that's lacking that would be a good thing that we can do, that we can incorporate, making sure that there's more exposure. He also talked about incorporating field-based components to supplement learning, not just the sit and get type mentality that the students normally get, but having project-based learning strategies. And I think that's something that's really important for our African-American males, because most of them are hands-on. By nature and by culture, they're hands-on, but I guess the educators, like I said, there's lack of experience. They wouldn't know that if they're not taught that, or they're not taught about our boys. They don't know about the African-American male, so it's kind of hard for them to be able to do that. And that was one of the points that was made. How can you teach what you don't know? The ones that are preparing our instructors to teach our students, they don't know. And then there's the risk of misinformation, them being misled about their history or about things that pertain to them. So there has to really be a revamping of the curriculum. And even in our college system, when we're educating teachers, and I know for myself, I didn't learn how to relate to my students and really how to teach from being in the classroom learning in college. I learned by actually doing it. And that was one of the points that was made too. And from my own experiences that I had in college. So I knew what I wished I had received and what I know that I didn't receive that, so now I can give that to my students. And I think that's something that's really important. And I want to go ahead and we have a comment from Sanford campus. It says, faculty need to be mindful of their privileged thinking, recalling the comment, I have too many students to remember. Students are required to digest complex, unfamiliar material daily. Faculty should be able to reciprocate this by being present to their students, by remembering their names and points of background. And that was something that was also mentioned in the video, knowing your student's name. I think that's something that's really important, even speaking to your students. We came back for this school term, I did a workshop, and I asked the instructors, how many of them actually speak to their students. A lot of them didn't think that mattered, and that was something that was important to them. So being aware is very important, and that's what we hope that you get from this Black Minds Matter project that we're doing. Being aware of what's going on. I've heard so many instructors say, oh, I wasn't aware. This really helped me to know that these type of things are important to the success of our students. And yes, they're important for all students, but especially important for our African-American students.
I think it's very important for faculty to be knowledgeable of their own biases. Once you go into the classroom, how you were raised, what your thought process are, and what you project in your classroom. A lot of people deny that fact, but unfortunately, it is what it is. If you grew up thinking a race of people was one way, and you see that person, you're gonna stereotype that student. I think stereotypical thoughts are based in fear of what they don't truly know. So they kind of detach themselves from the African-American male because, as Barbara said earlier, they see those males as incapable or inferior or hostile per se. And that's one of the reasons why it's very important for us to know what we think our thought processes are before we try to exclude a certain race of people or to deny a person the opportunity to get the best educational experience just like their counterparts. But I think it's important for us to make sure that we know who we are as an individual, take care of us, kind of counsel ourselves to be able to be effective in the classroom for our students.
Thank you. I'm going to go to question 2. Question 2,
We
yes.
have one more
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. I was just going to add on to question one about what Dr. Jones said about the ability to connect with our black students. I think that's very important, especially the very first day of class. You know, when the students come in, you have different kind of students. And I think that's where we set the stage. And that's where the students feel how this professor is going to be, how the class is going to be ran. I think having them understand the expectations of that course, and how the course is going to be laid down is very important. And also, I mean, since we have different kind of students in the classroom, students learn differently. I think we cannot just stick to one learning style. We should explore different learning techniques so that all students in the course could benefit from what's been taught.
Thank you. Question 2, and I'm going to ask Professor Hogan to address this first, since she's in the classroom. What are some strategies and practices that you can employ to support learning, development, and success of black males? So what are some of the strategies that you think that we can employ to help improve our success rate for our black boys?
I think, just like Dr. Job said previously, we have to set the expectation, let them know the expectations. Because I feel that once you're rooted in expectations, once you know what you're supposed to do, that's half the battle. Communication is key. I think it's very important to know the student's name, to be able to call them by name, to address them by name, because it kind of, it makes you, it kind of takes the fear. Because most of the time when black students come in, they're first generation students, especially in my courses, they're first generation students. They don't have a blueprint on knowing what to do or even what to expect in college. And my class is designed and geared to preparing these students for post-secondary education and kind of make the seamless transition from high school to post-secondary education. So being able to debunk the myths of college when it comes to academic success, that black people are not deserving of a higher education, or that black males especially are inadequate to be able to succeed in post-secondary education. That is my job. And the way I do that, first and foremost, I ask them, what are your expectations? What do you hope to succeed? What do you hope to gain from coming to school? And once they give me that answer, then I know how to best address it. Because just like Dr. Job says, there are different learning styles. And as a professor, I have to be able to address all those learning styles and change up my methodology of teachers to be able to give them the best form of education, because ultimately that's what they're here for people to give their 100% all to make sure that they are capable and successful in matriculating through school. So basically it's just talking to the students, finding out what their expectations are, where their shortcomings, giving assessments in school to see what their interest levels are, what their current skill sets and abilities are, to be able to know how to move forward with the student.
Thank you. And some of the strategies that was mentioned in the video was having mentoring programs. Like a lot of the students said they haven't seen or they never had a African-American teacher or saw teachers that looked like them, so they don't have those role models. And to see that would be very motivating to them, to have a role model, have someone that looks like them. Another strategy was to have peer groups. For teachers to have high expectations of all their students, and particularly our black males students. So and that's part of the myth that there's low expectations, but to raise their expectations of the students. And I think that's something else that we need to do, that we can do. And some other strategies that were mentioned in there, and I kind of mentioned earlier about exposing them to different learning styles, different environments. Not just the sit and get type of mentality that they're used to. So I think revamping our curriculum to fit our students, to fit our black male students, would be something that would be beneficial.
I have a question for our students here. We talk about creating peer groups or having peer groups, and I often reference your African American Cultural Forum. But if it were not for that group, how might at the college we get you interested in a peer group, and what would it take to keep you involved?
Interested in a peer group, as in, like, does it emphasize?
How's AACF being a part of that? Has that helped you? Because that serves as a peer group. So how has that helped you?
What piqued your interest and what keeps you involved?
Oh well, just the things we do around the community. On the campus, I feel like we are the best club in school. So yeah, we do win club of the year like all the time. So um, uh, just seeing that, just being around people that look like you, people who challenge themselves like you, and just by being around them, you might not even notice, but you're actually trying to be like them. You're actually they're they're influencing you in a way you don't know, but you're striving to succeed as you go along. And I feel like if you're around the right people, your attitude changes, your mindset changes, and if you're around positivity, if you're around people who are goal oriented, I think if your peer group is surrounded by those principles, I think that's what interests me the most about a peer
I can say just having a feeling that it's family on campus, not just from home, because some people go far from school and that they lose that feeling of being alone. So being here in the club, it has helped me open up to other people that are different and just being able to learn from them and not only just personal life, but taking the same course. So it helped us definitely stay involved, activities in school to bring us close together.
I think too, for the purpose of the question, what kind of strategies that we could develop to increase graduation rates. Research suggests that when black males are educated by those who look like them, that increases their graduation rates. And that's just not for faculty, but when we look at mentors, a lot of times the mentors, they come from student affairs as well. And so we're talking about outside of the classroom, and that same research suggests as well when mentors look like them, they graduate. And so I think that's in terms of what we can do as an institution. This is something perhaps that we should look inward. How diverse is faculty? How diverse is our staff? How diverse is our administration? Because we're looking at increasing retention rates of these students. We must do our part. Now, mentorship is also twofold. It's not so much of what you all are receiving, but what can you give? And so a lot of times our mentorship has to also perhaps look at non-conventional ways of mentoring these students in terms of those outside influences that may be hindering their academic growth. And we've learned this through the videos. A lot of these students are coming in with lows that are unknown to their other contemporaries. They are working full-time jobs. They have families. And so perhaps part of the conversation is how do we teach or how do we encourage effective responsibility at home while becoming or maintaining your academic excellence, and that may include becoming fathers. And I mentioned that because one of our facilitators mentioned that we must, in terms of recommendations, we must involve parents as instructional partners. And so once again, we are reinforcing the importance of parenting has on the academic success on black males. And it goes beyond even some research that I was able to do. It came back to the home being a key factor in what has propelled me to continue forward and onward. And so I said that because that was one of the recommendations. The student has to do their parts, but we as an institutional should be challenged to do our part to make sure that when these students come on this campus, that they have a chance and that we somewhat acknowledge the research, because this is not the gospel according to Gerald, but this is proven research that has been conducted. When these students are taught, mentored by people who look like them,
Yes.
they stay in school.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Jones. That is so true. And often, as I was talking to Javed here when we were coming over, they don't see instructors that look like them. So they don't know that they can be doctors, lawyers. They can succeed. You may fail a class, or you may be doing bad in a classroom. That don't mean you quit. If they see others looking like them that have gone through some things and have persevered and have been able to be successful. And a lot of times I'm very transparent. That was something that was mentioned also in the video, some things that we can do. Sometimes when we're talking to our students and getting to know them, be transparent with them. Let them know, hey, I didn't just get here overnight. I had to struggle. I had to stay up some sleepless nights and study. I had to walk to school. I had to catch the bus to get there. They look at, now you're driving a nice car and, oh, look at you. But these are the things that I had to do to get here. So sharing your experiences with your students so they can know that you've been there and you understand can make a world of a difference. And I think for me, one of my students in the club, me sharing an experience with him that I had actually stopped him from dropping out. And he's doing really well right now. And to me, that's a success. And those are the type of things that we should be able to do. And for me, that's why I'm here, and that's why I do what I do. And another thing it mentioned was getting to know your students on a personal level. Sometimes I know we say we don't have time, but when you see that student failing or not doing well, intervening early, and that was another strategy that was mentioned in the video. Intervene early to let the students know, hey, I see you're not doing well, what's going on? And that just that one little conversation, maybe 2-second conversation, can make a big difference. They can see that you're concerned and that you really care, and that may prompt them to do better and motivate them to do better and tend to get back on track, knowing that their instructor really cares, not just seeing that they're failing and continue to just let them fail through the class, and then in a semester nothing's done and they're not motivated and you're not motivating them. So that's something I thought was a big, was a very important strategy that I know works, because I have used that just by intervening, catching those students early on and saying, hey, I noticed you didn't do well on test 1, what's going on? Oh, I was working late, I had this going on, that going on. And that really helps to motivate the students to get back on track. Would anyone else like to add to question 2 before we move on?
Right. I think we've actually talked about most of them, and I think one of the panel members did talk about know their names. I think that's very important for all faculty to know their students' name, but also sometimes the students give them another name that they prefer to be called in. I think it's important to refer to them or call them by that name that they want to. And looking at the video also, it talks about we have to have intrusive relationships with our students. And I think that's important, learning about their interest. So getting to know your students is a key. Knowing what they want to do when they leave Seminole State, that's important. I think if students feel that we care, I mean, we talked about last session, the other mother, and some of us look at it differently like others. We were not thinking about just being in fact, they're all our children. It was just, I think the concept was just used to show care and concern when the students show up in our classrooms. I think that's very important. One thing also that the video talked about is connecting people, but not services.
Not service, yes.
And I think that's important when we have students that come to us and we're sending them to, they say, the student services. Instead of just telling them, go to the student service and do this, maybe say, hey, go to the student service, ask for Dr. Jones, or ask for Dr. Lott. At least, so that at least they have a name to go to instead of just going to the student service and try to, do things differently. I think, and also, summative symbols. I think that was important, giving them something that shows care.
Right.
If a student is struggling in your class, maybe, give them a nice gesture, maybe something cheap, but something encouraging.
Right.
If they cannot afford a book, if you could let them use a book, just anything that would just show care, and the students could say, you know what, this professor really care. Really. So if he cares or she cares, I have to take responsibility and try to show her that I could do this work. And just like I think it says, it takes a village to raise a child.
Right. And just like Dr. Job just said, connecting with people and not services. And one of the things that I do, being the advisor of the African American Cultural Forum, is, Professor Quick was here, Advisor Quick was here at one of our last tapings. She was my go-to person that I would send my students to. And not only would I send the students there, we would have a session when we would meet, our club would meet. She would actually come up and talk to the students. So she was my go-to person. It was like having that village, part of that village that I would connect with. We had Professor Wright, who does accounting. She would come to our meetings and talk to the students about accounting and budgeting and different issues that they may have. So having that group, having that connection, not only with the service, but not with service, but with people. And I think that's very important. I've seen that in our club, having the students have those people actually come to the meeting and speak with them, showing that they're interested. If there's a student having trouble with advising, I would say go see Ms. Quick, and they knew who she was because she had come and spoken with them in the club, so they were very comfortable to go down and talk to her. A lot of times students don't go seek help when they need it, and that is something that we need to really work on with our African-American males, seeking help when it's needed. And we know why they don't, but doing these type of things will help them be more comfortable with the individual that they're seeking help from.
I have a couple of comments from the other campuses. Both campuses really felt that Dr. Jones's comments were on point. And I have a comment that from a faculty member who's been on hiring committees, said there's not a lot of faculty that make it to the interview stage, and that as an institution, we need to do a better job of getting the word out to minority candidates. Also, in regards to this question from the Sanford campus, having a a network of support beyond yourself before referring outside resources, proactively ensuring a streamlined experience is important to go along with what you were just saying. And also that the relationship needs to be cultivated before the student does something good, that it's important for us to plant seeds. And we know that the relationship is the foundation, as Dr. Wood pointed out in one of his previous videos, that really was the foundation for academic and student success.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to question 3. How can educators, and I'm going to ask Dr. Jones address this for us, how can educators embed resistance and empowerment into the curriculum, and what should this look like?
Well, one of the things that I think it's important, it goes back to a student development theory, and it's called the Schlossberg transition theory. And the theory has 3 components. The first one is moving students in, moving students through, and then moving students out. And so when I process this question in terms of resistance and empowerment into the curriculum, this is very, very, this is some serious work in terms of getting students through the process. We can get them in from a student affairs component, but once we get them into the classroom, that's what a lot of the research suggests. The earlier research of Tinto says that when students are engaged in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom, they have a better chance of graduating. But I think for the purpose of this particular question directly, we're hearing the same types of language over and over again in terms of the curriculum. How do we draft a curriculum that reflect all of our students, and particularly our Black male students? How do we consider their cultural needs, things that may be of interest to them in terms of things that they may deem important that may not be the norm? Because here's the thing. When Tinto did his earlier research on retention, and a lot of scholars quote that a lot, especially for those of you all who are writing dissertations and you talk about how do we retain these students, we must be careful that his early research dealt with mainstream America. And it did, in other words, it dealt with white students. It did not take into account other ethnic minorities who have helped grown the academy since when that research was out there. And so I always encourage people that there are other retention models out there in terms of engaging our ethnic students into completing college. And some of those other scholars include Hopper. We've heard from him a couple of weeks ago. Some of the Hayesdorn did some great work. Even Carr did some great work on student development theories. And so I just hope that we think outside of the box. I'm not a faculty member, but I do understand the whole philosophy on getting students through and the importance of students not just being involved in the classroom, but outside the classroom as well, encouraging them to lead beyond the classroom. And that's why I'm so encouraged to see these black males down here who are leading, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom with the African American Cultural Forum. And so that's my take on resistance and empowerment into the curriculum. But how do we teach through the lens that really engage all of our students, and that may be through a non-traditional method, where we could strike an interest in some current trends of learning that our students would get excited about college and wanting to go to school, and then could teach it beyond the moment to their children's children.
Thank you. We're going to ask Professor LaBranch to address that question, since she is a math instructor inside of the classroom dealing with students as well.
I'm sorry, you repeat the question?
How can educators embed resistance and empowerment into the curriculum, and what should this look like?
So one of the things that we could do is to, going back to what Dr. Hogan said, and that is asking students what their expectations are, and then reminding them of that. I like the speaker's suggestion in the video where, I think it was Dr. Wood actually, and he talked about giving students something tangible to remind them why they're here. So for him, it was the bet that he won and the dollar bill that he kept forever. For another student, it was the doctor's lab coat. So help students to keep the big picture in mind, because as Dr. Jones is mentioning here, what we're doing in the classroom should extend far beyond the classroom and far beyond one semester or 1 year. What we hope truly as educators that we're instilling in these students is a love for learning.
Yes.
And a goal to maintain that and to share the knowledge that they acquire with others. And so, excuse me, I do believe that it helps to have students see the bigger picture. One of the activities that I use, not in the mathematics class, but in the class I used to teach on study skills as related to mathematics, is have them create a vision board or something similar. It may not even be a board. It may just be a collection of items, or it might be something that they've done digitally. But as a reminder that this one class is just a small stepping stone in the bigger picture on the way to achieving your goals. So I think it's important to help students have something that reminds them of why they're here.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the last question. And as I read the last question, I'm going to remind us of some things that Dr. Wood mentioned at the beginning of the video, and we've kind of mentioned those earlier. What do you plan to do differently tomorrow to help advance outcomes for Black boys and men? And this goes back to summing up what Dr. Wood said in the video to start out, relationships. We have to build relationships with our students, with all students, but particularly our Black male students. We have to know their names. We have to let them know that we're concerned about them. We're interested in what they do. I know where Javed works. I know that Marquise is a model. I know what he does. So knowing that what the students do, that makes a big difference, and I let them know that you're interested in them. And a lot of times when a student knows that you're interested, they're going to do their best to, in a sense, please you. So that means they're going to do their best in the classroom. They're not going to want to fail. They're not going to want to let you down. So they're going to do their best. Avoid the approach me first attitude. Go to the student. If you see them walking or you're walking on campus, say hello to the students. Recognize warning signs early, and I mentioned that before. Be intentional with your students. Appropriate disclosure, build trust. Sometimes we have to be transparent, like I mentioned earlier as well, to let them know that I'm concerned about you, and I know what you're going through. I've gone through the same thing, and I'm here to help you. But also being careful not not to say make an equivalency, avoid equivalency statement like I did it, you can do it type attitude, but let them know, hey, I went through it. I know it's hard. I got through it, and I'm going to help you get through it. So the way that we approach them with being transparent is important as well. And the last one was connect with people and not services. And so those are things that we can do today. And those are things that doesn't cost any money. All it calls us to do is be human, be civil. And a lot of times we think that it takes a lot, but our students are not being successful, according to my research. It has nothing to do with what's inside of the classroom, the work itself. It has to do with what we do, the extra things that make a difference, our relationship with them. It may be extra external exercises or things that they're doing outside of their homes, other things that has nothing to do with their content in the classroom. So those are things that we need to look at and be aware of. Being aware of these things are very important. So those are some things I think that we can do today to advance the outcomes of our Black males.
I want to point out Dr. Byfield submitted a comment. Excuse me, a comment. I think we have a fundamental difference between student development services and faculty. Faculty, in my opinion, aren't focused on getting students through. Rather, I feel many are trying to weed out. And I think that goes back to the traditional view of academia, where faculty feel it is their role to protect their discipline, and that's understandable. But at the same time, our goal is to educate students. And so we have to be mindful that our practices in the classroom aren't, as I mentioned earlier, keeping students detached and disassociated from the material when our goal really is to help them to learn and to be and do. So when we talk about some of the things that we can do, I think it's important for faculty to model for students what it means to be a student of their respective discipline, while also keeping in mind those student differences. Now, as a faculty member, one might ask, well, when and where do we find time to do all this, to get to know our 100+ students, and, or 90 or however many there are, and to know, those individual things about them so that they feel that we are concerned, and most faculty generally are, just feel that there isn't enough time or opportunity to get to know each and every one of those students on that particular level. At the same time, we don't want students to feel that it's superficial and disingenuous. How do we address that?
Well, what I do in my classroom, I incorporate that into an assignment, information assignment, information sheet. I ask a multitude of questions as opposed that relates to them personally, not academically, because I need to get to know my students just like they need to get to know who I am, to feel that I'm actually genuinely concerned about their outcome, their educational attainment. So that's how I do it. I'm not quite sure how other people do it, but I think they're once you have 5 classes of 30 students, it's very difficult, like you said, but not impossible. Letting students know that you are here for them. There's any issues outside of school, outside of what it is that you're teaching them, that can come to you. They feel like you're approachable. That helps the student to also to let down their guard, to let you in, and let you be able to mold them into what they need to be successful in education. But you do have to be genuine. You do have to put yourself out there. And like I said, the way I do it is I just incorporate it into an assignment.
All right. So, that last question, what I would say is actually let the students know that they matter when they come to your classrooms. Let them know that we are here to support them and educate them and also listen to them. And also, just going back to what Dr. Wood said, actually, the D effect, the 3D effect. We need to change our perceptions, those unconscious biases that we have. We need to eliminate, distrust, disregard, and disdain, and then encourage their brilliance and dignity and their morality. And that will be it.
And I think it's also important that we be careful of the things that we say. Be careful of our own implicit or unconscious biases. Dr. Wood started out this week's video with talking about pathologizing culture. And he mentioned that it is the notion that the values and communication styles of the dominant white culture are ideal. Hence, we say things as Their parents value sports over school, which is not true. They aren't here for school just for socializing. They. And every time we use the word they or there, we're generalizing a group of people that we're saying for all. And we know in diversity and inclusion, we do not speak in those types of tones. And so I am glad for those of you who want to research further the pathologizing culture. That's very, very interesting. And I think that is something that we all now have a responsibility, that when we hear our peers speaking in this language, because we've sat through this Black Minds Matter course for the past 8 weeks, we have a responsibility to interrupt bigotry and implicit biases whenever we hear them at this institution, because we've been embedded in this work now for 8 weeks, and many of us have been doing this for years. And so some of you all are new to this. We welcome you to it. And for those of you all who are going to see this for the first time, we ask you to join this campaign, this work, because when he talked about the pedagogy of education reaffirming Black minds, he talked about being fully present. And one of the things that he said is that as an educator, Professor Lott just mentioned this, this work is time consuming. And so my encouragement to my peers is that we cannot get weary in well doing, because as you know, we'll reap if we faint not. And that is really, really true. And so I just really want to encourage all of us in this work. We may not see the needle moving right away, but if we keep on pressing on, we're going to close that gap. But we must be committed to this work, and we also must put our money where our mouth is.
And on that note, I would like to thank you again for joining us for week 8 for Black Minds Matter. And we will see you next week for week 9 and 10 as we continue our discussion on Black Minds Matter. Thank you.